What if the night you thought you won everything was actually the night you lost it all? Marcus Ashford came home at 2:47 in the morning, smelling like jasmine perfume that wasn't his wife's. He expected Sarah to be waiting up, like she always did, ready to forgive, like she always did. But this time the penthouse was dark, empty, and on the kitchen counter sat three things that would change his life forever. His wedding ring, divorce papers already signed, and a flash drive labeled "The Truth." See, while Marcus was building a secret life with his mistress, spending $43,000 on hotel rooms and lies, Sarah was doing something he never saw coming. She was pregnant, she was gathering evidence, and she was planning the kind of revenge that doesn't just hurt, it destroys completely. This is the story of a woman who everyone underestimated, a cheating husband who thought he was untouchable, and a courtroom showdown where recordings, receipts, and one very visible baby bump revealed secrets that would send a man to federal prison. But here's what nobody expected: the mistress who became an ally, the doorman who kept receipts for 6 months, and the moment a judge looked a liar in the eye and said, "You will receive nothing." This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about what happens when a woman finally stops playing nice and starts playing to win. The clock on the dashboard read 2:47 in the morning when Marcus Ashford's black Porsche pulled into the underground garage of the Greenwich Club. His designer suit was wrinkled, his tie loose, and the scent of jasmine perfume, not his wife's vanilla, clung to his collar like evidence he was too drunk to notice. He stumbled through the lobby, past Hector, the night doorman, who looked away with practiced discretion. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt longer than usual, his reflection in the mirrored walls showing a hickey barely hidden by his collar, lips swollen from kissing someone who wasn't Sarah. Marcus fumbled with his keys, finally getting the door open. The apartment was dark, silent in a way that felt wrong, though he couldn't quite place why. "Sarah?" he called out, his voice echoing off the marble floors. "Babe, you still up?" Nothing. He flicked on the kitchen lights and stopped cold. The counter that usually held Sarah's neatly organized mail and her morning coffee setup was bare except for three items arranged with deliberate precision. His platinum wedding band sat alone in a small pool of lamplight. Beside it, a manila envelope. Divorce papers, he realized as he picked them up with shaking hands, already signed by her in that elegant script he used to love. Sarah Hartford, not even Ashford anymore. A flash drive labeled "The Truth" in her handwriting, and a note on cream stationery that smelled faintly of her perfume. "Marcus, by the time you read this, I'm already gone. You'll never find me. The flash drive has everything I know. The lawyers have even more. You chose her. So I'm choosing Maymeo. Don't look for me. Don't call. Don't try to fix this. You'll spend the rest of your life wondering what you lost." Sarah, his hands started shaking. Not the note, not like this. Sarah didn't do dramatic exits. Sarah was steady, predictable, safe. Sarah waited up for him. Sarah forgave him. Sarah always stayed. Marcus rushed through the apartment, denial giving way to panic. The master bedroom closet, half empty. Her side of the bathroom, toothbrush gone. Makeup vanished. The special face cream she spent $200 on, missing. The guest room where she'd been sleeping lately, completely cleaned out. He grabbed his phone, 47 missed calls to her number over the past 3 hours. Every single one straight to voicemail. He tried again. The automated voice that answered made his stomach drop. "The person you're trying to reach is no longer accepting calls from this number." "No, no, no," Marcus whispered, scrolling frantically through his contacts. He texted her best friend Maya. "Where is Sarah? Is she with you?" The response came immediately. "Don't contact me again. My client will communicate through legal channels only." My client. Legal channels. The words hit him like a punch. Marcus collapsed onto the couch, still holding his wedding ring. After 6 years of marriage, after everything they'd built together, how had it come to this? When had she planned this? How long had she known? The flash drive sat on the coffee table, accusatory. His laptop was right there. Part of him knew he shouldn't look. The bigger part of him had to know what she knew. He inserted the drive with trembling fingers. The screen filled with folders, each one a nail in his coffin. Hotel receipts, text messages, bank transfers, photos. His face drained of all color as he opened the first folder. The Crosby Street Hotel, the St. Regis, the Plaza. Receipts going back 6 months. Every lie he'd told, every late night, every business trip that wasn't business at all. The photo folder was worse. Professional surveillance shots. Him and Amber at outdoor cafes. Him and Amber entering hotels. Him and Amber at Sarah's Hampton house. Visible through the windows. Intimate in ways that left nothing to the imagination. "What the hell did you do to me, Sarah?" he whispered. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew. He knew exactly what he'd done. He just never thought she'd figure it out. And he certainly never thought she'd leave. His phone buzzed. Amber. "Hey, baby, you home yet? I miss you already." Marcus stared at the text, then at the empty apartment around him, then at the divorce papers with Sarah's signature. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus Ashford realized he'd played a game he couldn't win. And Sarah Hartford had already declared checkmate. 8 weeks earlier, the morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Tribeca penthouse, casting golden light across the Hudson River. Sarah Hartford Ashford stood in her cashmere robe at the La Marzocco espresso machine, preparing her husband's coffee exactly the way he liked it. Dark roast, 2 sugars, splash of cream, the same way she'd made it every morning for 6 years. At 34, Sarah still turned heads with her classic beauty, blonde hair in a messy bun, minimal makeup, the kind of natural elegance that spoke of old money and good breeding. Princeton class of 2012, former investment banker at Goldman Sachs, now a full-time wife focused on building the family she and Marcus had always dreamed about. The intercom crackled. "Good morning, Mrs. Ashford. Your car's ready whenever you need it." "Thanks, Hector," Sarah replied warmly. The doorman had been with the building for 20 years and treated her like a daughter. She heard Marcus's footsteps on the marble stairs. He appeared in a perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit, already checking his phone, already halfway out the door mentally. "Morning, babe," he said, kissing her cheek without looking up from his screen. "Big day. The Robertson deal is closing, and I've got back-to-back meetings until at least 8 tonight." "That's great about Robertson," Sarah said, handing him the coffee. "Are you sure you can't make the doctor's appointment at 3? It's just a follow-up, but Dr. Palmer wanted to discuss the next IVF cycle." Marcus's face flickered with something, annoyance, guilt, before smoothing back into his charming smile. "Babe, you know I would if I could, but this is my career we're talking about. The promotion to COO depends on deals like this. You understand, right?" She understood. She'd been understanding for 3 years now, ever since she'd given up her own career at his request. "One of us needs to focus on family," he'd said. The translation, "I need you available, not competing." "Of course," Sarah said quietly. "I'll take notes and fill you in tonight." "You're the best." He kissed her forehead, grabbed his briefcase, and was gone, leaving the scent of Creed cologne and the faint feeling that she was disappearing a little more each day. Sarah finished her coffee, then cleaned the kitchen with the efficiency of someone who had too much time and too little purpose. The penthouse was immaculate because she had nothing else to do. The penthouse was a wedding gift from her parents, technically in both their names for tax purposes, though it was Hartford family money that bought it. Her father, Richard Hartford, had founded Hartford Investments 40 years ago and built it into a powerhouse. When Sarah married Marcus, Richard had welcomed him into the firm, making him a VP almost immediately. Marcus's entire career was built on nepotism, though he'd never admit it. He preferred to think of himself as a self-made success story. Sarah's phone buzzed with a reminder. Dr. Palmer appointment, 2:30 p.m. She looked around the empty penthouse. They'd been trying to get pregnant for 2 years. 6 rounds of IVF, $87,000 from her trust fund, countless hormone injections, and 1 devastating miscarriage 4 months ago. She'd called Marcus 14 times that day, bleeding and terrified. He'd been at a client dinner and hadn't answered until hours later. "I'm sorry, babe," he'd said. "My phone died. Are you okay?" She'd lied and said yes, even though nothing had been okay since. Sarah walked to the guest bedroom they'd started converting into a nursery, Paint samples covered one wall, soft yellows and gentle greens. Gender neutral because they didn't know if they'd have a boy or girl, if they'd have anyone at all. Sometimes she wondered what she'd given up. Her job at Goldman had been demanding but fulfilling. She'd been good at it, maybe even great, but Marcus had been persuasive. Once we have kids, you'll want to be home. Why not start now? Enjoy your life, no stress. Except IVF was nothing but stress, and Marcus was never home. And somewhere along the way, Sarah Hartford had become Sarah Ashford, and then just Mrs. Ashford, and finally just the woman waiting in the empty penthouse for a husband who was always busy. She shook off the melancholy and got ready for her appointment. Dr. Palmer was one of the best fertility specialists in New York, and Sarah was determined to stay positive. This time would be different. This time would work. As she grabbed her keys, she noticed Marcus's suit jacket draped over the dining room chair. He must have worn a different one. She picked it up to hang it properly, her hands moving automatically through the practice routine of being a wife. But today, something fell from the pocket. A receipt, Crosby Street Hotel. Room 408, $650. Yesterday's date. Sarah's hands went numb. Marcus had told her he was working late at the office yesterday. Back-to-back meetings, he'd said. Wouldn't be home until after midnight. She turned the receipt over, looking for some explanation. Maybe a client meeting? But no company would expense a hotel room for a meeting in Manhattan when they had perfectly good conference rooms at the office. She set the receipt carefully on the counter and picked up the jacket again. This time she looked closer. A long dark hair on the shoulder. Sarah was blonde, a faint stain on the collar, deep mauve lipstick. Sarah wore nude gloss. And the smell. Not just his cologne. Something else. Jasmine. Heavy and sweet and wrong. Sarah sat down slowly on one of the dining chairs, jacket in her lap, receipt in her hand, the truth settling over her like ice water. Her husband was having an affair, and she was on her way to a doctor's appointment to talk about bringing his child into the world. Sarah made it to Dr. Palmer's office on autopilot, the hotel receipt burning a hole in her purse. The fertility clinic at Weill Cornell Medical was filled with hopeful couples, women with swollen bellies, and people who still believed in happy endings. Sarah felt like an imposter among them. Sarah Hartford Ashford? The nurse called her back. Doctor. Rebecca Palmer was in her 40s, with kind eyes and a warm smile that usually made Sarah feel safe. Today, nothing felt safe. How are you feeling? Dr. Palmer asked, settling into her chair across from the exam table. Fine, Sarah lied. Tired, stressed. That's understandable given everything you've been through. I wanted to follow up after your last visit. Your hormone levels were slightly elevated, which could be residual from the miscarriage, but I'd like to run another test just to be safe. When was your last period? Sarah paused, thinking back. I don't know. 6 weeks? Maybe 7? The hormones from IVF always mess up my cycle. Dr. Palmer's expression shifted slightly. Let's do a quick test just to rule things out before we talk about the next round of IVF. Rule what out? Pregnancy, Dr. Palmer said gently. Sometimes when women stop trying so hard, when they take a break from the treatments, their body relaxes, and nature finds a way. Sarah wanted to laugh. After 2 years of failing, after 6 rounds of IVF, after $87,000 and countless tears, the idea of getting pregnant naturally felt like a cosmic joke. But Dr. Palmer handed her a cup and directed her to the bathroom, and Sarah went through the motions because that's what she did. She followed directions. She played her role. She was good at being who people expected her to be. 5 minutes later, she sat in the exam room, scrolling through her phone to avoid thinking about the hotel receipt, about the jasmine perfume, about the dark hair that wasn't hers. Dr. Palmer knocked once and entered, and the expression on her face made Sarah's breath catch. Sarah, Dr. Palmer said softly, sitting down across from her. You're pregnant. The room tilted. What? You're about 6 weeks along. The heartbeat is strong. Congratulations. 6 weeks before she'd found the receipt, before she'd smelled the perfume, before she'd known that her husband was a stranger who lied as easily as breathing. But we haven't done IVF in 3 months, Sarah whispered. We were taking a break. Sometimes that's all it takes. Your body was under so much stress from the treatments. Once you stopped, it had a chance to reset. Dr. Palmer reached across and squeezed Sarah's hand. I know this is overwhelming. Take your time processing it. Processing. How could she process that she was finally, miraculously pregnant with the baby she'd wanted so desperately, and simultaneously discovering that her marriage was built on lies? Does anyone else know? Sarah asked. No one, just you and me. You'll need to decide when and how to tell your husband. Sarah drove home in a daze, one hand on the steering wheel, the other unconsciously resting on her still flat stomach. She stopped at Gourmet Garage and bought ingredients for Marcus's favorite meal, herb-crusted lamb with rosemary potatoes. She even bought a pregnancy announcement card with a cheesy cartoon stork on it. This was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. Instead, she sat in her car in the parking garage of the Greenwich Club and practiced saying the words out loud. Marcus, I'm pregnant. Marcus, we're having a baby. Marcus, remember how we've been hoping and praying and spending every penny we have? Well, it finally happened. She wanted so badly to believe there was an explanation for the receipt. Maybe a colleague needed a room. Maybe Marcus booked it for a client. Maybe the lipstick belonged to someone who rode in the elevator with him. Maybe the hair floated from somewhere else. Maybe she was imagining everything because the IVF hormones had made her paranoid, just like Marcus always said. But when Sarah walked into the penthouse carrying grocery bags and hopeful lies, she found Marcus's suit jacket still draped over the dining chair where she'd left it. And this time when she picked it up, something else fell out. A second receipt. Sant Ambrosios, $212, yesterday at 2:47 in the afternoon. The exact time Marcus claimed he was in back-to-back meetings. Sarah pulled out her phone and opened the credit card app. Joint account, everything visible. She scrolled through the recent charges. 3 weeks ago, Crosby Street Hotel, $700. 5 weeks ago, The Plaza, $900. 2 months ago, St. Regis, $1,100. Every single one on nights when Marcus claimed he was working late, or away on business trips, or too busy to come to her doctor's appointments. Sarah sat on the floor of the kitchen, surrounded by grocery bags and the ruins of her marriage, and called the only person she trusted to tell her the truth. Maya, it's me, she said when her best friend answered. I need you to come over right now, and I need you to bring your lawyer brain, because I think my husband is cheating on me, and I just found out I'm pregnant. Maya Richardson arrived within the hour. They'd been friends since Princeton, where Maya had been the brilliant scholarship student who graduated top of their class and went on to Harvard Law. Now she was a senior partner at Davis Polk, specializing in family law, which meant she'd seen every kind of betrayal humanity had to offer. She took one look at Sarah's face and pulled her into a hug. Tell me everything. Sarah showed her the receipts, the charge, the timeline. Maya examined them like evidence at a crime scene, her expression growing harder with each new piece. This is fresh, Maya said, holding up the Crosby Street Hotel receipt. Within 24 hours. And these charges go back months. Sarah, this isn't a one-time mistake. This is a pattern. But what if there's an explanation? There's always an explanation, Maya said gently. The question is whether it's the truth or another lie. And based on what I'm seeing here, I'd bet on lie. What do? You gather evidence, quietly, before you confront him. Because if he's smart, and I'm guessing he is, he'll have a story prepared. He'll gaslight you. He'll make you feel crazy for suspecting him. That's what they always do. They? Sarah's voice cracked. Cheaters, Maya said bluntly. Look, I hope I'm wrong. I hope Marcus walks through that door with a perfectly reasonable explanation. But you need to protect yourself, especially now that you're pregnant. He doesn't get to have his cake, eat it too, and claim Father of the Year when it's convenient. Maya pulled out her phone and made a call. Victor, it's Maya Richardson. I need a favor. I have a friend who needs someone discreet, someone who can run surveillance and gather documentation. Yes, the usual. How soon can you get here? Detective Victor Torres arrived 45 minutes later. He was in his 50s, ex-NYPD, with the weathered face of someone who'd seen too much and the kind eyes of someone who still cared. He listened to Sarah's story without judgment, taking notes in a small leather notebook. Let me guess, Torres said when she finished. Late nights, new passwords on his phone, suddenly working out, new cologne, distracted during conversations, less interested in intimacy. Sarah stared at him. How did you know? Because they were all the same. The details change, but the pattern never does. Torres pulled up Marcus's public Instagram profile on his phone. The most recent post was from 3 days ago, a selfie in workout gear with the caption, "No pain, no gain, stay hungry, stay humble, hashtag blessed, hashtag hustle hard, hashtag family man." Torres let out a dry laugh. They always have the hashtags. The guiltier they are, the more they post about family values. It's like they're trying to convince themselves they're good people while they're out there destroying lives. What do you need from me? Sarah asked. Access to phone records if you can get them. Credit card statements, which you already have. In 3 days, I'll tail him, document his movements, get photographs if there's someone else involved. If he's clean, you'll know. If he's not, you'll have evidence that will hold up in court. Sarah nodded slowly, feeling like she was watching her life from outside her body. This morning she'd woken up as a woman trying to get pregnant. Now she was pregnant, planning surveillance on her husband, gathering evidence for a divorce she didn't want to believe it was coming. One more thing, Torres said as he stood to leave. Whatever you find out, whatever happens next, don't tell him about the pregnancy until you're ready. Information is power, and right now you need every advantage you can get. After Maya and Torres left, Sarah sat alone in the penthouse and placed both hands on her stomach. 6 weeks along, barely pregnant, really. A tiny cluster of cells that was somehow already a person, already loved, already wanted. I'm so sorry, she whispered. Your father is a stranger, and I don't know how to protect you from that yet. But I will. I promise I will. She threw away the lamb and rosemary potatoes, threw away the pregnancy announcement card, and climbed into bed fully dressed. When Marcus came home at 11:30 that night, smelling like scotch and lies, she pretended to be asleep. And when he kissed her forehead and whispered, "Love you, babe," she kept her eyes closed and her breathing steady and wondered how long he'd been saying words he didn't mean. The answer, she was starting to realize, was probably longer than she wanted to know. 3 weeks passed in a strange kind of purgatory. Sarah went through the motions of being a wife, while Detective Torres quietly built a case that would shatter the illusion completely. She made Marcus's coffee every morning. She attended charity events on his arm. She smiled at his colleagues and laughed at his jokes and played the role so well that even she almost believed it sometimes. Almost. The pregnancy progressed. Morning sickness hit hard around week 8, forcing Sarah to run to the bathroom at random intervals to vomit up everything she'd eaten. She told Marcus it was a stomach bug. He barely looked up from his phone. You should see a doctor, he said absently one morning, scrolling through emails while she emerged from the bathroom, pale and shaking. I will, she promised, one hand on her secret, the other gripping the doorframe for support. Torres sent updates every few days. Photos of Marcus entering the Crosby Street Hotel with a woman in her late 20s, pretty in a generic way, with dark hair and too much ambition in her eyes. Photos of them at lunch in Midtown, his hand covering hers across the table. Photos of them leaving his office building together, his arm around her waist in a gesture that looked practiced, familiar, comfortable. The woman's name was Amber Morrison, 29 years old, Marcus's executive assistant, hired 18 months ago. From a small town in Texas, fought her way to New York on scholarships and student loans, desperate to make something of herself. She saw Marcus as her ticket to a better life. Sarah could almost feel sorry for her. Almost. On a Friday morning in mid-October, Marcus announced at breakfast that he needed to go to the Hamptons for the weekend. The Robertson clients want to see the property, he said, not meeting her eyes. They're very private, don't like conducting business in the city. I should be back Sunday evening. The Hamptons house, Sarah's family compound in Sagaponack, a 6-bedroom estate on 3 acres with private beach access. Her grandmother had left it to her, a place filled with childhood memories and summers that felt like forever. Sarah had given Marcus the keys years ago because that's what wives did. They shared everything. Want me to come? Sarah asked, testing to him. I could help entertain the clients. No. The word came out too fast, too sharp. Marcus caught himself, smoothing it over with his charming smile. I mean, no need. It's just business talk. Very boring. You should rest, especially with that stomach bug. Sarah nodded, watching him pack his overnight bag. Designer weekend clothes, expensive cologne, the watch she'd given him for their 5th anniversary. All the tools of a man preparing to betray his wife in her own family home. After he left, Sarah called Torres. He's going to the Hamptons, the estate in Sagaponack. I'm already on him, Torres replied. GPS tracker on his car, tail vehicle maintaining distance. Do you want me to send you photos or handle it myself? Sarah thought about it. The smart thing would be to let Torres document everything, keep her distance, stay protected. But something inside her needed to see it with her own eyes, needed to witness the destruction of her marriage in real time so she couldn't convince herself later that it was all a misunderstanding. I'm coming out there, she said. Sarah, I don't think it's my house, Victor, and I need to know. She called Maya next. I'm driving out to the Hamptons. Marcus is there with her. Liv, don't. Let Torres handle it. I have to see it, Maya. I have to know I'm not crazy. There was a long pause on the other end. Then Maya sighed. Fine, but I'm coming with you. You don't do this alone. They met at Maya's brownstone in Fort Greene and drove out together in Maya's black Mercedes. 2 hours of traffic and terrible pop music and the growing certainty that Sarah's life was about to change forever. Torres texted when they were halfway there. Confirmed, second vehicle in driveway. White BMW registered to Amber Morrison. They've been inside for 3 hours. You sure you want to see this? Sarah's hands tightened on her phone. 9 weeks pregnant now, barely showing, nauseous from more than just morning sickness. I'm sure. They parked 2 blocks from the compound and walked the rest of the way. It was a perfect October afternoon, the kind of crisp fall day that made the Hamptons feel like paradise. Sarah had spent summers here as a child, swimming in the ocean and building sandcastles and believing in things like forever and true love. Marcus's Porsche sat in the circular driveway. Beside it, the white BMW. And through the massive living room windows, Sarah could see 2 figures moving around her grandmother's kitchen. She approached slowly, Torres materializing from somewhere behind them with a camera equipped with a telephoto lens. Through the window, the scene looked obscenely domestic. Marcus cooking eggs at the Viking stove, wearing one of the aprons Sarah had bought, dancing slightly to music Sarah couldn't hear. And Amber, the woman who was sleeping with her husband, wearing Sarah's cashmere robe, the one from Loro Piana that cost $800, the one Sarah wore every Sunday morning while reading the Times and drinking coffee. This woman was wearing Sarah's robe in Sarah's house while sleeping with Sarah's husband and probably dreaming about Sarah's life. Marcus leaned down and kissed Amber's neck. She laughed, tilting her head back in a gesture of easy intimacy. They looked happy, comfortable, like a couple who'd been together for years instead of months. Sarah's vision blurred. Beside her, Maya grabbed her arm to steady her. Breathe, Maya whispered. Just breathe, Liv. But Sarah couldn't breathe because her hand was on her stomach and her husband was in her kitchen with another woman, and everything she'd believed about her life was a lie. Torres took photos methodically, professionally. Click, click, click. Marcus and Amber cooking together. Marcus and Amber laughing together. Marcus and Amber kissing in the kitchen where Sarah's grandmother had taught her to make chocolate chip cookies when she was 8 years old. Sarah turned away before she could see more. Made it to Torres's car before the sobs came, deep and wrenching and broken. Maya climbed into the back seat beside her and held her while she cried, not saying anything because there was nothing to say. Finally, when Sarah could speak again, she asked the question she'd been avoiding. How long has this been going on? Torres checked his notes. Credit card records show hotel charges going back 6 months. But the apartment rental, he's been leasing a place for her in Soho, that started 8 months ago. $4,800 a month, paid directly from his personal account. 6 months. Their entire last IVF cycle. her miscarriage, all the times he'd been too busy to come to appointments or hold her while she cried. He'd been building a whole separate life with someone else. "What do I do?" Sarah whispered. Maya's expression was grim. "You drive back to the city, you say nothing yet. Torres documents everything, and we build a case so airtight that Marcus can't wriggle out of it with his charm and his lies." "But what about the baby?" "That's exactly why we do this right. You're not just fighting for yourself anymore. You're fighting for your child. And that means we need every piece of evidence, every advantage, every strategic move in place before you confront him." Sarah leaned back against the seat, exhausted and heartbroken, and newly determined. She placed both hands on her stomach, still flat, still secret, still hers alone. "Okay," she said quietly. "We do it right. But Maya?" "Yeah? I'm not the woman who sits back and takes it anymore. Whatever happens next, I'm the one who decides how this ends." The drive back to the city took forever and no time at all. Sarah watched the landscape blur past, rich people's houses and perfect lawns and the illusion of happiness that money could buy. She'd grown up in this world, learned its rules, played by them her whole life. But Marcus had changed the game. And if he wanted war, Sarah was finally ready to fight. When she got home that night, the penthouse was dark and empty. Marcus's text came through around 11. "Meeting ran late, staying in the Hamptons until tomorrow. Love you." Sarah deleted the text without responding. Then she opened her laptop and started making lists. Evidence needed, assets to protect, legal strategies. Everything Maya had taught her about what came next in a divorce where one party had something to hide and the other party had something to prove. At the top of the page, Sarah wrote one word in capital letters: preparation. Because if Marcus thought she was going to be the easy, forgiving wife he'd always known, he was about to learn a very expensive lesson about underestimating Sarah Hartford. Marcus came home Sunday evening with flowers and excuses. The meeting had gone well, he said. The clients were impressed with the estate. Things were moving forward with the Robertson deal. He was sorry he'd been gone all weekend, but you understand how important this is for us, right, babe? Sarah accepted the flowers, peonies her favorite, which meant he'd at least remembered that, and smiled and said all the right things. Inside, she was counting the hours since she'd seen him with Amber, calculating how many times he'd lied to her face since Friday morning. The answer was 17, not counting the lies of omission. That week, Sarah sent an anonymous email to Hartford Investments' HR department. She drafted it carefully with Maya's help, attaching one of Torres's photos, cropped and untraceable, of Marcus and Amber entering the Crosby Street Hotel together. "Someone should know that Vice President Marcus Ashford is having an inappropriate relationship with his direct report, Amber Morrison," the email read. "This violates company policy and creates a hostile work environment, and I thought you should be aware." Within 48 hours, Marcus was called into a meeting with Jennifer Walsh, the HR director. He came home that evening in full performance mode, tears in his eyes, outrage in his voice. "Something terrible happened," he said, pulling Sarah into his arms. "Someone accused me of having an affair with Amber. It's completely false, Sarah. I swear to you. This is office politics. Someone trying to sabotage my career right before the COO decision." Sarah let him hold her, feeling the lie vibrate through his chest with every breath. Why would someone make that up? Jealousy. Probably Johnson from accounting. He's been gunning for me since I got promoted over him last year. Marcus pulled back, looking directly into her eyes with perfect sincerity. "Babe, I need you to believe me. There is nothing going on between me and Amber. She's my assistant. That's all." "I believe you," Sarah lied, and watched relief flood his face. The performance continued for 2 weeks. Amber posted on LinkedIn that she was leaving Hartford Investments to pursue new opportunities, grateful for the mentorship and growth. Marcus showed Sarah the post as proof. "See, HR made her resign to avoid the appearance of impropriety. I told them nothing happened, but they didn't believe me. I feel terrible that she lost her job over false accusations." He love-bombed Sarah with attention she'd been craving for years. Flowers every few days, breakfast in bed, dinner reservations at her favorite restaurants. He even booked couples therapy with Dr. Stephanie Bennett, an expensive therapist on the Upper East Side. "I want to work on us," Marcus said, holding Sarah's hands across the dining table. I know I've been distant with all the work stress, but you're my priority. Our marriage is my priority. I love you, Sarah. I need you to know that. The words should have made her happy. 3 months ago, they would have. But now Sarah heard them for what they were. Another manipulation, another lie, another chess move in a game Marcus didn't realize he'd already lost. At their first therapy session, Bennett, silver-haired, elegant, with an office full of expensive art, asked them both what they hoped to achieve. I want to rebuild trust, Marcus said, squeezing Sarah's hand. We've had a rough patch. The fertility treatments have been hard on both of us, but especially on Sarah. I want to support her better. Sarah said all the right things too, playing her part perfectly. But she watched Dr. Bennett carefully, noting how the therapist nodded sympathetically at everything Marcus said, how she seemed to already believe his version of events. Sarah, Dr. Bennett said gently, how do you feel about the accusations against Marcus? I'm not sure what to believe, Sarah answered honestly. Trust is the foundation of marriage, Dr. Bennett replied, but we also need to examine why you might be feeling insecure. Is it possible the fertility struggles are creating anxiety that's manifesting as suspicion? The question landed like a slap. Even the therapist was gaslighting her. That night, Sarah lay awake while Marcus slept soundly beside her and wondered if she was losing her mind. Maybe she was imagining everything. Maybe Torres's photos had some explanation. Maybe the hotel receipts were really for client meetings. Maybe she'd spent so long wanting to get pregnant that she'd created drama where none existed. Maybe Marcus was right, and she was just emotional and paranoid and broken from all the failed IVF cycles. In the morning, she found the pregnancy test box she'd hidden in the back of her closet, 10 weeks along now. Still early, still fragile, still secret. She placed one hand on her stomach and whispered, I'm not crazy. I know what I saw. I know what he is. The baby, of course, didn't answer, but the certainty settled in Sarah's bones anyway. She wasn't imagining this. She was surviving it. By week 6 after the HR investigation, Sarah had almost convinced herself that maybe, just maybe, the affair was over. Amber was gone. Marcus was attentive. They were going to therapy. Maybe this was the wake-up call they'd needed to fix their marriage. Then, on a Friday night in early November, Marcus announced he needed to return to the Hamptons for another meeting with the Robertson clients. Already? Sarah asked carefully. Didn't they just see the property 3 weeks ago? They want to review some final details. Very hands-on clients. Marcus was already packing his weekend bag, not meeting her eyes. I'll be back Sunday evening. Sarah called Torres the moment Marcus left. He's going back to the Hamptons. I'm already on him, Torres replied. Want me to send updates? Every hour. The updates came like clockwork. Friday evening, Marcus arrived at the Sagaponack estate at 7:42 p.m. Saturday morning. White BMW pulled into driveway at 9:15 a.m. Saturday afternoon, surveillance cameras showed 2 figures on the deck, wine glasses, physical intimacy. Sunday morning, Torres sent a text. She never left. The LinkedIn post was theater. She's been consulting remotely the whole time from an apartment he's renting bought for her in Soho. Lease in his name, $4,800 a month. Sarah stared at her phone, feeling the last shred of hope die. The therapy, the flowers, the declarations of love, all of it was performance. Marcus was simply better at lying than she was at detecting lies. I'm going out there, Sarah texted Maya. No, let Torres, it's my house, Maya, and I need him to know that I know. Then I'm coming with you. They drove out Sunday evening, timing their arrival for when Marcus and Amber would be relaxed and unguarded. Sarah used her key to enter her own home, moving quietly through the foyer she'd walked through 1,000 times as a child. Music drifted from the kitchen. John Legend's All of Me, the song from their wedding, the song Marcus had told her would always be theirs and only theirs. Sarah rounded the corner to find Marcus and Amber slow dancing in her grandmother's kitchen, his hands on her waist, her head on his shoulder. Both of them lost in a moment that looked like love. Get out of my house, Sarah said, her voice calm as death. They sprang apart like teenagers caught by parents. Marcus went white. Amber looked confused, her eyes darting between Sarah and Marcus as her brain tried to process what was happening. Who? Amber started. I'm his wife, Sarah said, looking directly at her. And this is my family's estate, so I'll ask once more. Get out. Sarah, this isn't what it looks like, Marcus began. Sarah laughed, cold and sharp. It's not what it looks like? You're cooking my grandmother's recipe in my kitchen with your mistress while wearing the apron I bought you. Which part am I misunderstanding? Amber's face crumbled. Wife, you said you were divorced. You showed me papers. They were fake, Sarah said, something like pity cutting through her rage. He's been lying to both of us. Amber, let me explain. Marcus tried, but she stepped away from him like he was suddenly radioactive. Did he tell you he loves you? Sarah asked Amber directly. That his wife doesn't understand him? That you're special? Amber nodded, tears starting. He told me the same thing 6 years ago, word for word. You are not special, honey. You are convenient. Sarah, stop, Marcus snapped. You're being cruel. Cruel? Sarah's voice finally rose. You fucked another woman in the bed where I mourned our miscarriage. Don't talk to me about cruel. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911. Marcus lunged for it, but Sarah stepped out back, putting the kitchen island between them. Yes, Sarah said calmly into the phone. I'd like to report trespassing at 47 Dune Road, Sagapuntak. My husband has become physical, and I need police assistance. I didn't touch you, Marcus shouted. She's lying. But Amber had seen enough. In that moment, watching Marcus's face contort with rage when he thought he was losing control, she finally understood exactly what kind of man she'd been sleeping with. The Southampton police arrived within 10 minutes. The scene was awkward, a domestic dispute in a multi-million-dollar estate, 3 people who all looked like they belonged in a country club commercial, rather than a police report. Officer Rodriguez was patient and professional. What seems to be the problem? Sarah, still eerily calm, explained, This is my family's property. I asked these 2 to leave. My husband became aggressive when I tried to call you. That's not true, Marcus protested. My wife is having some kind of breakdown. Sir, Officer Rodriguez said firmly, whose name is on the property deed? The Hartford Family Trust, Sarah replied. I'm Sarah Hartford. This is my family's estate. The officer looked at Marcus. Is your name on the trust, sir? Marcus's face went through several expressions before landing on defeated. No, CM. Then you need to leave. As the officers escorted Marcus out, he turned one last time. Each time. Sarah, please, we can fix this. I love you. Sarah looked at him with eyes that had finally seen everything. No, you don't. And you know what? I don't think you ever did. After Marcus left, after Amber fled to her car sobbing, after the police filed their report and drove away, Sarah sat alone on the deck of her childhood home and watched the moon rise over the Atlantic Ocean. She'd thought confronting them would feel like victory. Instead, it felt like grief. The death of a dream she'd held since she was a girl who believed in fairy tales and happy endings. But she wasn't that girl anymore. She was a woman who'd seen her husband's true face. A woman who was 10 weeks pregnant and alone. A woman who had a choice to make about what happened next. Sarah pulled out her phone and called Maya. I need you to prepare divorce papers, and I need you to help me disappear, because I'm done being Sarah Ashford. It's time to become Sarah Hartford again. You're sure? Maya asked. Sarah looked at the house behind her, the life she was leaving, the man who'd destroyed everything they'd built. I've never been more sure of anything. Then let's make him regret he ever underestimated you. Sarah should have known Marcus wouldn't go quietly. She returned to Manhattan on Sunday night and spent the next 48 hours planning her exit with military precision. Maya connected her with a bank in New Jersey where Sarah opened a new account, transferring funds from her personal savings. Money Marcus couldn't touch because it predated their marriage. Torres installed a discreet camera system in the penthouse to document any future interactions. And Sarah began the painstaking process of photographing every important document, every asset, every piece of evidence she might need. She was 12 weeks pregnant now, still not showing in loose clothing, but the morning sickness was brutal. She threw up 7 times on Monday alone, telling Marcus it was food poisoning when he bothered to notice between phone calls. You should really see a doctor, he said absently, scrolling through emails. I will, Sarah lied, one hand on her still secret pregnancy. Monday evening, Marcus tried to talk about the weekend. Sarah, we need to discuss what happened. I'm filing for divorce, Sarah said calmly, cutting him off. Maya's preparing the papers. You'll be served this week. Marcus's face went through shock, anger, and calculation in rapid succession. Don't be dramatic. Every marriage has rough patches. We can work through this. You've been having an affair for at least 6 months. You rented an apartment for your mistress with our money. You brought her to my family's home. There's nothing to work through. Our money, last time I checked, I'm the one earning a salary. You haven't worked in 3 years. The words hung in the air like poison. Sarah felt something inside her crystallize into diamond-hard resolve. You're right. I gave up my career for you, for us, for the family we were supposed to build together. But you were building a different family with someone else. One mistake, Sarah. One mistake, and you're willing to throw away 6 years? It wasn't one mistake. It was a choice you made every single day for 6 months. Maybe longer. Every time you lied to my face. Every time you touched her instead of me. Every time you spent our money on her while I sat home alone trying to get pregnant with your child. Those were choices, Marcus, and now I'm making mine. She walked out of the room before he could respond, locking herself in the guest bedroom where she'd been sleeping. She heard him pacing outside, heard his muffled phone call to someone, probably Amber, probably telling her Sarah was being unreasonable, probably painting himself as the victim. Sarah didn't care anymore. She was done trying to understand him, done trying to fix what he'd broken. She just wanted out. But Marcus had other plans. The next morning, Sarah woke to pounding on the front door. She checked her phone, 7:15 in the morning. Marcus had left hours ago for an early meeting, or so he'd said. She opened the door to find 2 NYPD officers and a family court clerk. Sarah Hartford Ashford? One officer asked. Yes? We have an emergency order of protection filed against you by Marcus Ashford. You need to come with us. Sarah's brain short-circuited. What? The officer handed her papers. Marcus was claiming she'd physically attacked him on Saturday night in the Hamptons, that she'd been increasingly unstable and violent, that he feared for his safety. The evidence he'd submitted, photos of scratches on his arm that Sarah had never seen before, a recording of her threatening him that must have been edited from Saturday's confrontation, and a witness statement from Amber Morrison claiming she'd seen Sarah assault Marcus. It was all lies, all of it. But Sarah understood immediately what Marcus was doing. He was using the legal system to control her, to make her look unstable, to undermine any custody claim she might make. Because he must suspect, Sarah realized with growing horror, he must suspect she's pregnant. The order requires you to stay at least 500 feet from Mr. Ashford, the officer explained. Since he's currently residing in the Tribeca penthouse, you'll need to leave immediately. But it's my home. My family owns. Ma'am, if you refuse to comply, we'll have to arrest you, and that will only make things worse in court. Sarah called Maya with shaking hands. Marcus filed a restraining order. They're making me leave the penthouse. Don't resist, Maya said immediately. If you get arrested, even if the charges are dropped later, it destroys your credibility. Pack what you need. I'll meet you at my place. We'll fight this in court, but you need to stay calm right now. For the baby. The baby. Right. Sarah was 12 weeks pregnant and being forced out of her own home by a husband who turned the law into a weapon. She packed quickly while the officers watched, feeling humiliated and powerless. In the lobby, she passed Hector, the doorman. Mrs. Ashford, he said quietly, I don't know what's going on, but I want you to know I've seen Mr. Ashford bring that other woman here multiple times. If you ever need someone to testify to that, you let me know. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Hector. Outside, she saw Marcus standing at the penthouse window with his coffee, watching her leave. And beside him, barely visible, was Amber. She'd never left either. The resignation, the LinkedIn post, the remorse, all theater. They'd simply gone underground. Sarah climbed into Maya's car and felt the last piece of her old life shatter. Over the next week, Marcus deployed his strategy with ruthless efficiency. He emptied their joint bank account of $87,000, the exact amount Sarah had spent from her trust fund on IVF treatments, and claimed it was marital funds he was entitled to. He canceled all the credit cards that were in his name, leaving Sarah with no access to money except the few thousand she'd moved to her personal account. Then he went after the trust fund itself. Sarah's uncle Robert was the trustee of her inheritance from her grandmother, $12 million dollars that should have been untouchable. But Marcus had spent years cultivating a relationship with Robert through golf games and expensive dinners. When Marcus's lawyer contacted Robert claiming Sarah was mentally unstable and making erratic decisions, Robert froze the entire trust pending an investigation. "Uncle Robert, you've known me my whole life," Sarah pleaded on the phone. "How can you believe him over me?" "Sarah, sweetheart, Marcus has shown me medical records from your therapist. Dr. Bennett's report says you have depression, paranoia, obsessive thinking, and the police report from the Hamptons. He made all that up. He paid Dr. Bennett to write a fake report." "That sounds paranoid, Sarah. Do you hear yourself? Maybe you need some rest, some time away." The betrayal from her own family cut deeper than anything Marcus had done. Sarah hung up and stared at her bank account on her phone. $4,217. That was all she had left. No access to the penthouse. No access to her trust fund. No credit cards. No income of her own. And she was 12 weeks pregnant with a baby that would need medical care, legal protection, and a future she could barely imagine providing. "He took everything," Sarah whispered to Maya that night, sitting in the small guest room of Maya's Fort Greene apartment. "How did he take everything?" "Because the system is designed by men who know how to weaponize it," Maya said grimly. "But we're going to fight back. We just need time." Time was something Sarah didn't have much of. Every day brought new challenges. Marcus's mother, Diane, started calling Sarah's family and friends, spreading a carefully crafted story. Sarah had attacked Marcus in a jealous rage. Sarah was refusing treatment for her mental health issues. Sarah was making false accusations to cover her own instability. The whispers spread through their social circle like wildfire. At yoga class, women Sarah had known for years avoided eye contact. At the coffee shop, the barista who usually chatted with her suddenly went silent. Sarah's phone calls to old friends went unanswered. Even her father started to doubt her. Richard Hartford had early-stage Alzheimer's, though the family kept it quiet. His memory was spotty, his judgment compromised. When Marcus visited him at his office, without Sarah knowing, and showed him the police report, the fake medical records, the edited recordings, Richard believed every word. "Sarah's been under a lot of stress," Richard told his business partner Martin. "Maybe Marcus is right. Maybe she needs help." The isolation was suffocating. Sarah found herself spending entire days in Maya's guest room, staring at the ceiling, wondering how her life had imploded so completely. She was 13 weeks pregnant now, starting to show a small bump when she lay flat. The baby was growing healthy and strong according to Palmer, but Sarah felt anything but strong. One night, unable to sleep, Sarah opened her laptop and started searching. Can father get custody of unborn baby? How to disappear completely? Is it safe to fly during pregnancy? She wasn't suicidal exactly, but she understood for the first time how people reached the point where disappearing seemed easier than fighting. Her phone rang. Dr. Palmer. "Sarah, you missed your appointment yesterday. I'm worried about you." "I'm sorry," Sarah said, her voice flat. "Things have been complicated." "I can imagine, but I need you to come in. Your 12-week scan showed everything healthy, but I want to check your stress levels. High cortisol can affect the baby's development." The baby. Sarah placed one hand on her small bump. In all the chaos of Marcus's legal warfare, she'd almost forgotten the reason she was fighting. "Dr. Palmer," Sarah asked quietly, "do you think I can do this? Be a mother? When I can't even protect myself?" "I think, doctor," Palmer said gently, "that you're stronger than you know. And I think that baby is lucky to have a mother who's willing to fight for them, even when everything feels impossible. But Sarah, you can't do this alone. You need help, real help." After they hung up, Sarah sat in the dark and cried until she had nothing left. Then she pulled herself together, washed her face, and walked out to where Maya was working at her dining table. I need to tell you something, Sarah said. And after I tell you, I need you to help me figure out how to win this. Because I'm pregnant, Maya, 14 weeks as of tomorrow. And Marcus cannot know until I'm ready. Because the second he knows, he'll use it to destroy me completely. Maya's face went through shock, then understanding, then fierce determination. Okay, we work with this. This is actually good, Liv. It gives us leverage. But we need evidence. We need testimony. We need... Maya's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered on speaker. Is this Maya Richardson? Sarah's lawyer. The voice was female, shaking, scared. Who is this? It's Amber Morrison, and I need to talk to you because I have something Sarah needs to hear, and I'm done protecting Marcus. Sarah's heart stopped, then started again, faster, harder, full of something that felt like hope for the first time in weeks. Maybe the war wasn't over yet after all. They met Amber the next morning at a coffee shop in Red Hook, far from anywhere Marcus might see them. Sarah hadn't slept, her mind cycling through every possible explanation for Amber's call. Another trap? More lies? Or something else entirely? Amber arrived looking nothing like the confident woman Sarah had seen in her kitchen. She'd lost weight, her face was drawn, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. She sat across from Sarah and Maya, trembling. "I didn't know," were the first words out of her mouth. About the pregnancy, about any of it. "He told me you couldn't have children." Sarah's jaw tightened. "And you believed him?" "He showed me medical records, fertility test results with your name on them. He said you'd given up, that the marriage was over in everything but paperwork." Amber pulled tissues from her purse with shaking hands. "I thought I was helping him escape a dead relationship. I didn't know he was still, that you were still." "Those were my private medical records," Sarah said slowly. "How did he get them?" "He stole them from your home," Maya answered grimly. "That's illegal use of personal health information. Another charge to add to the list." Amber looked directly at Sarah for the first time. "I'm so sorry. I thought I was different, special. But then I watched how easily he lied to you on Saturday, how quickly he could switch between us. And I started wondering, if he lied to you about me, what was he lying to me about?" "And what did you find?" Maya asked, pulling out her legal pad. Amber set her phone on the table. "Everything. I started recording our conversations after the Hampton house. I got scared, you know? Scared of ending up like Sarah, destroyed, blamed for everything, with nothing." She opened her voice memo app. "I have 11 recordings. Want to hear the worst one?" Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. Amber pressed play. Marcus's voice filled the small coffee shop, clear and damning. "Sarah's too emotional to ever prove anything. Even if she tries, I've covered my tracks. The therapist will testify she's unstable. My mother's already poisoned her family against her." Amber's voice. "What about the baby?" Marcus's voice, cold as ice. "I'll use it. Custody battle keeps her tied up in court for years. She'll run out of money before I do. Then I get everything, the penthouse, the trust fund access. And I don't have to pay child support because we'll settle for supervised visitation I'll never use." Sarah felt the words punch through her chest. He didn't want their baby. This was all just leverage to him, another piece on his chessboard. "There's more," Amber said, switching to another recording. Marcus's voice again. "The idea was never to leave Sarah. The idea was to have both. You're the fun, she's the legitimacy. I need her family's money, but I don't have to be faithful to access it." Amber's voice. "That's horrible." Marcus's voice. "That's reality. Welcome to how the world actually works." The coffee shop had gone quiet. Even the barista had stopped grinding beans to listen. Sarah realized she was crying, but not from sadness anymore. From rage. Pure, crystalline rage. "Why are you doing this?" Maya asked Amber directly. "If you testify, Marcus's lawyers will destroy you. They'll call you a spurned mistress seeking revenge." Amber's laugh was bitter. "I'm already destroyed. Last night Marcus told me he's going back to Sarah once this blows over. Said I was good for what he needed but not wife material. I'm trailer trash he was slumming with. Those were his exact words." Sarah reached across the table and took Amber's hand. The gesture surprised them both. Thank you for doing the right thing. I'm not doing it for thanks, Amber said. I'm doing it because it's right, and because he would have done to me exactly what he did to you. We're not enemies, Sarah. We're both just women who believed a liar. Detective Torres arrived at the coffee shop 20 minutes later, having been listening from his car outside. He verified the recordings were authentic, documented the chain of custody, and added 11 more pieces of evidence to the mountain they were building. But they needed more. Over the next week, the case came together like a puzzle Sarah hadn't known she was solving. Torres had 6 months of surveillance photos, Marcus and Amber at 14 different hotels, entering Amber's Soho apartment 63 times, intimate in ways that left no room for doubt. Patricia Mitchell, a forensic accountant with an unimpeachable reputation, rebuilt the financial case. She found what Sarah's first accountant had missed, or been paid to hide. Marcus had embezzled $340,000 from client accounts at Hartford Investments over 2 years, funneling money to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. This isn't just marital infidelities, Mitchell explained to Sarah and Maya. This is federal wire fraud. The IRS will be very interested. Dr. Bennett, the therapist who'd written the fake psychiatric evaluation, was offered a deal by Maya. Testify truthfully about Marcus paying her $15,000 for a fraudulent report and keep your license. Lie and face professional sanctions and potential criminal charges. Dr. Bennett took the deal. The new psychiatric evaluation by an independent doctor was clear. Patient is under extreme stress due to marital betrayal and legal harassment, but is mentally sound and fully capable of decision-making. Uncle Robert's phone records told their own story, 47 calls with Marcus in 3 months. And on March 15th, a wire transfer, $25,000 from Marcus's personal account to Robert's. That's a bribe, Maya said flatly. He paid your uncle to freeze your trust fund. Even Sarah's father, despite his Alzheimer's fog, started to remember the truth when his business partner Martin sat him down with the evidence. Martin had noticed financial irregularities in Marcus's accounts months ago and had been quietly investigating. Now he had proof. Richard, Martin said gently, Marcus has been lying to all of us. Sarah was telling the truth. The hearing was set for 2 weeks away. 15 days for Sarah to hold herself together, to protect her pregnancy, to prepare for the moment when everything would come out in open court. She was 16 weeks now, starting to show a small but definite bump. She bought looser clothes, wore flowing dresses, and prayed nobody noticed before she was ready. One afternoon, Sarah sat in Maya's apartment reviewing testimony notes while Maya took a call in the other room. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Hector from the Greenwich Club. Just wanted you to know I told the lawyer everything I saw. Mr. Ashford bringing that woman to the penthouse when you were gone. I got the lobby camera footage going back 6 months. He won't get away with this, Mrs. Ashford. Not on my watch. Sarah read the message 3 times, then allowed herself the first genuine smile she'd felt in weeks. Marcus had underestimated everyone. Her, Amber, Hector, even his own mother, who'd reportedly walked out of Sunday dinner when she'd finally heard the recordings Amber had made. They're offering a settlement, Maya said, returning to the living room. Marcus's lawyer called. They want to settle out of court. He keeps the penthouse, you get $800,000 and walk away. No custody claims from either side. What did you tell them? Maya's smile was sharp as glass. I told them we'll see them in court because we're not settling for anything less than everything. Sarah placed both hands on her hidden belly. 16 weeks, 4 months. The baby was the size of an avocado now, growing strong despite the stress, despite everything. Good, Sarah said quietly, because I'm not settling either. Not anymore. The next 2 weeks crawled by with agonizing slowness. Sarah prepared for testimony, memorized timelines, reviewed evidence until she could recite it in her sleep. She met with her witnesses, Hector, Torres, Dr. Palmer, Nurse Carmen from the hospital, Patricia Mitchell, Dr. Bennett, and Amber, who looked Sarah in the eye during their final prep session and said, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm going to tell the truth no matter what they do to me on that stand. You're not asking for forgiveness, Sarah replied. You're offering testimony. That's enough. The night before the hearing, Sarah couldn't sleep. She stood on Maya's small balcony, looking out at the Brooklyn skyline, one hand on her stomach where her baby grew stronger every day. "Tomorrow we find out if truth matters," she whispered. "Tomorrow we find out if the good guys can win." Inside, her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Please don't do this. We can still fix everything. I love you." Sarah blocked his number, deleted the text, and went to bed. She had a long day ahead of her, and she was ready for war. The New York Supreme Court at 60 Center Street was built to intimidate, and it succeeded brilliantly. Sarah climbed the marble steps at 8:30 in the morning, Maya beside her, Torres and Patricia Mitchell behind them like an honor guard. Media crowded the entrance. Marcus had somehow leaked the hearing to gossip sites, probably hoping public pressure would force Sarah to settle. Instead, cameras caught her entering in a black maternity dress that finally, deliberately, showed the truth. 18 weeks pregnant now. Undeniable. The courthouse erupted in whispers. Flashbulbs popped. Someone shouted a question Sarah couldn't make out over the noise. She kept her head high, her hand protective over her belly, and walked through the chaos into the building. Inside the courtroom, Marcus sat with his legal team, 3 expensive lawyers in sharp suits. He saw Sarah, saw her belly, and his face went through shock to calculation to rage in seconds. His lead attorney, Benjamin Shaw, leaned over, whispering urgently. Judge Helen Rodriguez entered, a Latina woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen every kind of human ugliness and wasn't impressed by any of it. "This is not a circus," she said sharply as everyone rose. "I will have order in my courtroom. Sit down." They sat. Sarah felt her baby move for the first time, a tiny flutter like butterfly wings. She pressed her hand there gently, drawing strength from the life growing inside her. Shaw stood for his opening statement, smooth and polished. "Your Honor, this case is simple. Marcus Ashford is a man trying to save his marriage from his wife's mental instability. Mrs. Ashford has been diagnosed with depression and paranoia by a licensed therapist. She has acted violently toward my client, and she concealed a pregnancy for months in what can only be seen as an attempt to weaponize the child in these proceedings." He presented his evidence. Dr. Bennett's original fake report, the police report from the Hamptons, Marcus's scratched arm, the edited recording. Maya stood, and Sarah could feel the energy shift in the room. "Your Honor, what we have here is not a case of mental instability. This is a case of systematic manipulation, fraud, and abuse perpetrated by a man who has weaponized every institution, medical, legal, financial, to gaslight and control his pregnant wife. We will prove that every single claim Mr. Shaw just made is not only false, but criminally fraudulent." Judge Rodriguez leaned forward slightly. "Proceed." The first witness was Dr. Stephanie Bennett herself. Under oath, her polished facade crumbled quickly. "Dr. Bennett," Maya asked, "did you ever formally diagnose Sarah Hartford Ashford with depression, paranoia, or any mental illness?" The report indicated patterns of anxiety." "That's not what I asked. Did you ever formally diagnose her?" "No." "Did Marcus Ashford pay you to write a psychiatric evaluation of his wife?" Dr. Bennett's lawyer had advised cooperation. "Yes." "How much?" $15,000. The courtroom stirred. Judge Rodriguez's expression turned glacial. "And did you base this evaluation on your own clinical observations of Mrs. Ashford?" "No, I based it on information provided by Mr. Ashford about his wife's behavior." "So you took money from a husband to write a fake psychiatric report about his wife, whom you never properly evaluated, in order to make her appear mentally unstable in legal proceedings?" "When you put it that way, is there another way to put it, doctor?" Silence. "Your Honor," Shaw said, standing quickly, "we move to withdraw this evidence." "Too late for that, counselor," Judge Rodriguez said coldly. "Sit down. Continue, Ms. Richardson." The next witness was Uncle Robert. Maya walked him through his relationship with Marcus, the golf games, the dinners, the growing friendship. Then she showed the court records of the wire transfer. "Mr. Hartford, did Marcus Ashford give you $25,000 on March 15th? That was a loan. Do you have documentation of repayment terms?" "No, but..." "So Marcus Ashford gave you $25,000, and 3 days later you froze your niece's trust fund cutting off her access to $12 million that belonged to her. Does that seem ethical to you? Robert's face was ashen. I may have made an error in judgment. An error, Maya repeated flatly. You chose a man you'd known for 2 years over your own niece, whom you'd known her entire life, after he paid you $25,000. That's not an error, Mr. Hartford. That's corruption. Detective Torres presented his evidence methodically. 6 months of surveillance, 14 hotels, 63 visits to Amber's apartment, $43,000 spent on Marcus's mistress, while his wife struggled to pay for fertility treatments with her own money. Patricia Mitchell, the forensic accountant, destroyed Marcus's claim to financial innocence. $340,000 embezzled. Offshore accounts, shell companies, wire fraud across state lines. And where did this money go? Maya asked. Approximately $180,000 to an account in Miss Morrison's name. The rest to Mr. Ashford's personal accounts in the Cayman Islands. As Mitchell testified, 2 men in dark suits entered the courtroom and sat in the back row. Sarah recognized the badges on their belts. IRS. The lunch break came. Sarah sat in the hallway, hand on her belly, exhausted. A woman she didn't know approached hesitantly. I've been following your story online, the woman said. I'm sorry I believed the lies. You're incredibly brave. Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. Thank you. The afternoon session began with Amber's testimony. Shaw attacked her viciously. You're a homewrecker, aren't you, Ms. Morrison? Yes. You seduced a married man for money and career advancement? Yes. And now you're testifying because he dumped you? Amber looked directly at the judge. I had an affair with a married man. I was wrong. But that doesn't make what I'm about to say untrue. And I'm testifying because I finally understand that Marcus Ashford is a predator who uses women and discards them. I won't let him do to her what he tried to do to me. Maya approached gently. Ms. Morrison, do you have recordings of conversations with Marcus Ashford? Yes, 11 of them. Your Honor, may we play them? Judge Rodriguez nodded. Proceed. The courtroom listened in silence as Marcus's voice filled the space. His cold calculation about using the baby as leverage. His confession that he never planned to leave Sarah, that Amber was just the fun while Sarah was the legitimacy. His conversation with his lawyer about dragging out custody proceedings until Sarah ran out of money. With each recording, Marcus shrank further in his seat. His mother Diane stood up and walked out. Several of his colleagues followed. By the time the third recording finished, even his lawyers looked sick. Mr. Ashford, Judge Rodriguez said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence, I'm going to need you to take the stand. Marcus's cross-examination was brutal. Maya dismantled every lie systematically, then let him hang himself with his own words. You testified you wanted to be involved in your child's life, correct? Yes, of course. Then please explain to the court why you told your lawyer, and I quote from the recording, I don't care about the kid. That was taken out of context. What context makes I don't care about the kid sound good, Mr. Ashford? I meant in that specific moment, I was focused on legal strategy. So you use your unborn child as legal strategy? No, I mean, did you or did you not embezzle $340,000 from client accounts at Hartford Investments? I have no idea what you're talking about. Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit 43, wire transfers from Hartford Investments client accounts to offshore accounts in Mr. Ashford's name. The IRS agents in the back row stood up simultaneously. One approached the bench and whispered to Judge Rodriguez. Mr. Ashford, the judge said, you'll need to remain present after these proceedings. The IRS has questions about your tax filings. Marcus's lead lawyer, Shaw, gathered his papers with sharp, angry movements. Your Honor, I'm withdrawing from this case effective immediately. You're abandoning your client? I don't represent clients facing federal charges, Shaw said flatly, and walked out. Judge Rodriguez let the silence stretch. Then she looked at Marcus with an expression of pure contempt. I've presided over family court for 23 years, she began. I've seen terrible things, addiction, abuse, neglect, but this case is remarkable in its cruelty. Mr. Ashford, you are a liar, a thief, and a manipulator. You've abused every institution meant to protect people, weaponized them against your pregnant wife, and done it all without a shred of remorse. She let that sink in before continuing. I am granting Mrs. Ashford's petition for divorce. You will receive nothing. The prenuptial agreement you signed, which you conveniently forgot about, specifies that infidelity forfeits all marital assets. You are entitled to zero. Furthermore, I am ordering immediate supervised paternity testing. If this child is yours, you will have no custody, no unsupervised visitation, no parental decision-making authority. Mrs. Ashford will have sole legal and physical custody. I am also referring this matter to the Manhattan District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution on charges of fraud, embezzlement, perjury, and witness tampering. And Mr. Ashford, if you ever contact Mrs. Ashford again outside of court-ordered communication through attorneys, I will personally ensure you spend 30 days in jail for contempt. Do I make myself clear? Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. Yes, Your Honor. Good. Get out of my courtroom. Court officers escorted Marcus to a side room where the IRS agents were waiting. Sarah watched him go, feeling not triumph but exhaustion. It was over. Finally over. She collapsed into Maya's arms, sobbing with relief and grief and the overwhelming weight of everything she'd survived. Around them, people were congratulating her, patting her shoulder, offering support she desperately needed months ago. Amber approached hesitantly. I'm sorry it took me so long to do the right thing. Sarah pulled her into a hug. Thank you for doing it at all. Outside the courthouse, media swarmed. Sarah made a brief statement. Truth matters, justice matters, and no woman should have to fight this hard to be believed. Thank you. Then Maya drove her back to Brooklyn, to the small guest room that had been her refuge, and Sarah finally allowed herself to rest. 1 week later, she got the news. Marcus had taken a plea deal, 5 years federal prison for tax evasion, wire fraud, and embezzlement. He'd be disbarred from the financial industry permanently. Sarah placed one hand on her belly, 20 weeks now, halfway through, and whispered, It's over, baby. We're safe now. We're finally safe. And for the first time since this nightmare began, she believed it. 6 months after the courthouse hearing, Sarah Hartford stood in the kitchen of her new brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, making coffee and watching the morning light paint golden squares across hardwood floors. So much had changed that sometimes she barely recognized her own life. The brownstone had been her first purchase with the settlement money. Not huge, but hers, 3 bedrooms, a small garden, and most importantly, no memories of Marcus. She'd furnished it slowly, deliberately, choosing each piece herself instead of hiring a decorator the way she used to. Every chair, every painting, every curtain represented a decision she'd made alone. The baby monitor on the counter showed Emma Grace Hartford sleeping peacefully in the nursery upstairs. 3 months old, with wispy blonde hair and her mother's gray eyes. She'd been born healthy and strong, despite everything Sarah had endured during pregnancy. The doctors called it a miracle. Sarah called it stubbornness. Her daughter had inherited her refusal to quit. The doorbell rang. Maya, punctual as always, with coffee from the good place and bagels from the bakery Sarah loved. How's my goddaughter? Maya asked, setting down breakfast and immediately checking the monitor. Perfect. She slept 4 hours straight last night. Already an overachiever, I'm so proud. Maya poured coffee, then studied Sarah's face carefully. You look good, Liv. Really good. It was true. Sarah had gained back the weight she'd lost during the legal battle. Her hair was longer, healthier. The permanent tension in her shoulders had finally eased. She looked like someone who'd survived a war and was learning how to live in peacetime. I feel good, Sarah admitted. For the first time in forever, I actually feel good. Her phone buzzed with a text. Amber, first day at the DV Center, teaching women to recognize manipulation tactics. Terrified but ready. Thank you for giving me a second chance. Sarah typed back, you gave yourself a second chance, proud of you. Amber had completed a year of therapy and now ran workshops for women escaping manipulative relationships. She and Sarah weren't exactly friends. The history was too complicated. But they'd reached a place of mutual respect. Sometimes that was enough. Torres called with an update, Maya said, pulling Sarah back to the present. Marcus took the plea deal. 5 years federal prison for tax evasion, wire fraud, and embezzlement. Sarah nodded slowly, feeling nothing. No triumph, no anger, just a distant acknowledgement of justice served. How do I feel about that? How do you feel? Relieved. Emma's safe. That's all that matters. The doorbell rang again. Sarah's father, Richard, carrying flowers and looking nervous. His Alzheimer's had good days and bad days, but today was clearly a good one. He'd been working hard to repair their relationship since the truth came out, though some damage couldn't be completely undone. "I'm sorry I'm late," Richard said, checking his watch 3 times. "Traffic on the bridge." "Dad, you're right on time." Sarah hugged him, feeling his fragile bones, his uncertainty. "Come meet your granddaughter." She led him upstairs to the nursery where Emma slept in a bassinet painted soft yellow. Richard stood over her for a long moment, tears sliding down his weathered cheeks. "She has your mother's eyes," he whispered. "She does. I'm sorry, Sarah, for not believing you, for failing you when you needed me most." Sarah took his hand. "You're here now. That's what matters." They spent the morning together, the three of them, rebuilding what Marcus had tried to destroy. Richard held Emma while she cooed and grabbed at his fingers. Maya told stories about the firm's latest cases. Sarah made lunch and felt something she hadn't experienced in over a year: contentment. After they left, Sarah sat in the rocking chair by Emma's crib and opened her laptop. Hartford Analytics had launched 3 months ago, a financial consulting firm specifically for women going through divorce, helping them protect their assets and understand their rights. Sarah had leveraged her Princeton connections, her Goldman Sachs experience, and her painfully earned expertise in financial abuse. The company was already profitable. More importantly, it mattered. Sarah received emails daily from women thanking her for saving their financial futures, for believing them when no one else would, for showing them they could survive and thrive after betrayal. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Sarah Hartford?" A man's voice, official and careful. "Speaking." "This is Officer Martinez from Rikers Island. Marcus Ashford has been trying to call you. He's used all his phone privileges this month but wanted me to pass along a message." Sarah's hand tightened on the phone. "I'm not interested. He says he needs to talk to you about Emma, about custody, about being a father." For a moment, Sarah couldn't breathe. Then she found her voice, cold and clear. "Please tell Mr. Ashford that I have sole legal custody as determined by Judge Rodriguez. He has no rights to contact me. If he persists, I'll file harassment charges. Are we clear?" "Yes, ma'am. I'll pass that along." Sarah hung up and blocked the number. She looked down at Emma, sleeping peacefully, unaware that her biological father was trying to worm his way back into their lives. "You don't need him," Sarah whispered. "You never will. Your father will be whoever earns that title through love and showing up, not the man who shares your DNA." Emma stirred, made a small sound, then settled back into sleep. Sarah watched her daughter breathe, feeling fierce, protective love surge through her chest. The rest of the week passed in the comfortable routine Sarah had built. Morning wake-ups with Emma, with work calls from home while the baby napped, meetings with clients who needed her expertise, evenings with Maya or sometimes alone, reading while Emma lay in her bouncer, making the small sounds that meant she was content. Friday night, Sarah got an email from Marcus's lawyer. He was requesting modification of the custody order, claiming he'd been rehabilitated by his time in prison, that he deserved a chance to know his daughter. Sarah forwarded it to Maya with one word: no. Maya's response came immediately. "Already on it. He has zero ground to stand on. Judge Rodriguez's order was ironclad. He's fishing because he's desperate. Ignore it." But Sarah couldn't quite ignore it. That night, after putting Emma to bed, she stood at her bedroom window looking out at the Brooklyn skyline and allowed herself to remember. The man she'd married 6 years ago, the promises he'd made, the life they'd planned. Then she remembered the man he'd become. The lies, the manipulation, the cruelty, the way he tried to use their unborn child as a weapon. "I forgive you," Sarah said quietly to the night. "Not for you, for me, so I can raise Emma without bitterness poisoning everything." She meant it. She'd done enough therapy to understand that forgiveness wasn't about Marcus deserving it. It was about Sarah choosing peace over endless anger. But forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation. And it certainly didn't mean giving him access to Emma. 2 years passed. Emma grew into a bright, curious toddler with blonde curls and her mother's stubborn determination. She said her first word at 10 months, Mama. Took her first steps at 13 months, and by 2 years old could count to 20 and knew all her colors. Harvard Analytics had expanded to 3 employees and was valued at $2 million. Sarah had been interviewed by Forbes, invited to speak at conferences, and approached by publishers about writing a book on financial abuse and recovery. Her dating life was non-existent, and she was fine with that. She'd gone on exactly 3 dates in 2 years, all disasters. Most men were intimidated by her story, her success, or her absolute refusal to compromise her boundaries. The right person would come along eventually, or they wouldn't. Either way, Sarah had learned she didn't need a partner to be complete. One Saturday afternoon in early spring, Sarah took Emma to Central Park. They were feeding ducks by the pond when Emma suddenly tugged Sarah's hand. "Mama, look! Big ducks!" Sarah looked up from the bread they were throwing and froze. 15 feet away, watching them, stood Marcus. He looked terrible. Prison had aged him a decade. He was thinner, haunted, wearing a cheap suit that hung badly on his frame. His eyes were the worst part, desperate and empty simultaneously. They stared at each other across the expanse of green grass an impossible distance. Sarah's first instinct was to grab Emma and run. Her second was to call the police. Her third, surprisingly, was curiosity about what he might say. Marcus approached slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. "Sarah." "Marcus." Her voice was neutral. Emma clung to her leg, sensing tension. "Is that?" "Yes." "She's beautiful." His voice cracked on the word. "Thank you." Long, terrible silence. Ducks quacked obliviously. "Can I meet her?" Sarah's answer came without hesitation. "No, I'm her father. Biology doesn't make you a parent. Love does, showing up does, being there when it's hard does. I made mistakes. You made choices. Every day for months, you chose to betray me, to lie to me, to try to destroy me. Those weren't mistakes, they were decisions." Marcus's face crumbled. "I served my time. I went to therapy. I've changed. I'm glad you're growing. I really am. But Emma deserves someone who chose her first from the beginning. That was never you." "So I'll never know my daughter?" The words came out broken. "That's up to a judge if you want to pursue it legally. But honestly, Marcus, ask yourself, do you want her or do you want to win? Because she deserves a father who wants her for who she is, not what she represents." The truth hit Marcus visibly. His shoulders sagged. "I don't know if I know how to do that." "I know," Sarah said gently. "That's why the answer is no." She picked up Emma, who immediately buried her face in Sarah's neck. "Say goodbye to the ducks, baby. We're going home." As they walked away, Emma waved at the pond. "Bye-bye, ducks." Sarah didn't look back, but she felt Marcus watching them until they disappeared around the curve of the path. She expected to feel something, anger, sadness, triumph. Instead, she felt only relief. The chapter was finally, definitively closed. That night, after putting Emma to bed, Morrow's phone rang. Blocked number. She debated answering, then picked up. "Sarah, please." Marcus's voice, desperate. "I know I don't deserve anything, but I need—" She hung up. Blocked the number. Returned the phone to her pocket. Emma called from upstairs. "Mama, story." Sarah climbed the stairs to the nursery where her daughter waited with her favorite book, a story about a brave girl who went on adventures. She settled into the rocking chair, Emma curled in her lap, and began to read. "Once upon a time, there was a girl who thought she needed someone to save her, but then she learned something important." "What, Mama?" Sarah kissed the top of Emma's head. "That she could save herself, and that made her stronger than any prince could ever make her." Emma nodded seriously, processing this. "Like you, Mama?" "Like both of us, baby. We save ourselves, and we save each other." After Emma fell asleep, Sarah stood by the window looking out at the city that had been the backdrop for her marriage's destruction and her own rebirth. She placed one hand on the glass, feeling the cool surface, the boundary between inside and outside, safety and danger, past and future. Someone once told her that some people come into your life to teach you what love isn't, so you can recognize what love is. Marcus had taught her that lesson brutally. But Emma taught her every day what love should be: unconditional, pure, worth fighting for. Sarah didn't need a hero. She'd never needed saving. She'd needed to remember she was strong enough to save herself. And now she got to teach her daughter that same truth. Love shouldn't make you smaller, Sarah thought, watching lights twinkle across Brooklyn. Love should make you whole. She turned away from the window, away from the paths, and walked down the hall to her own room. Tomorrow she had meetings, client calls, a life to live, a daughter to raise, a company to grow, a future to build that was entirely her own. The happy ending she'd always wanted wasn't the one she'd imagined at 28, walking down an aisle toward a charming liar. It was better, harder won, more real, and completely hers. And that, Sarah decided as she fell asleep, was exactly how it should be.